This walkie-talkie is BS. A Radio Shack base station walkie-talkie, that is. But this is what really caught my eye. It's claimed to be a 6-transistor walkie-talkie. Now this was marketed as a toy for kids, so what at first glance may look like rugged construction is purely decorative. These grab handles are just flimsy plastic, as are the screwed-in panels. But it is a functional radio transmitter and receiver, better known as a transceiver, with a speaker and a detachable microphone with a push-to-talk switch. And also what may look like a plug to disconnect the microphone is not. It's hardwired. And this knob does nothing. I thought it might be an antenna that you can pull out, but it's not. It's just a decoration. But you do get an on-off volume control and a call button for making beeping noises, or at least theoretically you could use it to send Morse code, and they even included this chart to help you learn. Although I doubt very many kids ever used it for anything other than tapping out SOS, because this button is rather stiff and flimsy. It's Radio Shack catalog number 60-3067. It runs on one 9-volt battery. I don't know why they had to put 9V in quotation marks. And it was custom manufactured in China for Radio Shack. But like I said, it is legit. It has an FCC ID number and complies with Part 15 of the FCC rules. And according to that date code, this one was made in May 2000. Here it is in the 2000 Radio Shack catalog. They called it Base Station Command Center and 2 walkie-talkies. It was bundled with 2 handheld units, which I don't have, and the original price was $29.99. And just like the label on the front, the catalog listing calls it a 6-transistor base unit. And that's part of what I find interesting about it, because by the year 2000, a radio bragging about how many transistors it has wasn't just anachronistic, it was positively retro. Emblazoning the faceplate of a radio with the number of transistors it contains was a trend in the 1960s, such as on this 1962 Panasonic National Radio, which proudly proclaims to contain 6 transistors. Back then, transistors were the latest technology and were still quite expensive, and generally, the more of them that a radio had, the better its reception and sound quality were, and the higher its price was, so it was something worth bragging about. And walkie-talkies sold for consumer use were no exception, such as this 8-transistor walkie-talkie from Montgomery Ward circa 1964. But as the cost of transistors came down, inexpensive no-name radios started appearing, boasting impressively high transistor counts, but whose actual performance did not meet expectations. As the Kiplinger magazine wrote in December 1966, a lot of the transistor radios around this year are absolute frauds. You see them advertised for less than $10, and the ads say they have 10 to 15 transistors. A bargain? Absolutely not. Maybe half a dozen of the transistors in these sets actually work. The rest are dummies put into the set just to raise the count. As far as performance is concerned, they might as well be left out. Thankfully, a ruling by the Federal Trade Commission put an end to that transistor count deception as of December 1968. That led to the transistor count largely disappearing from the faceplate of radios in favor of the generic term solid state. And by the mid-1970s, integrated circuits, or ICs, superseded transistors as the new technology that radios bragged about having, which lasted for about a decade until ICs as well became inexpensive and commonplace enough that they were no longer worth advertising as a product feature. So that's what makes it so strange that this walkie-talkie from the year 2000 prominently states 6 transistor on it. The only explanation I have for that is that it must have been designed by someone who grew up in the 1960s and remembered the walkie-talkies, which mentioned how many transistors they had, and decided to put that on this one as well for a bit of nostalgia. And frankly, I don't believe it. I don't think a product this new, in the grand scheme of things, is actually going to be using discrete transistors instead of ICs. And they figured, it's a kid's toy. Who's going to open it up to check? Of course I will, but first let's see if it works. And one way you can tell this is definitely considered to be a toy is that the battery compartment is retained by screws, which is a requirement that went into effect sometime in the 90s. That all toys needed to have screw-retained battery compartments. So just unscrew that. It's almost there. And it runs on a 9-volt battery. The new battery has been installed, and I'll reinstall the cover and try it out. And now when I turn it on, I get a hiss from the speaker, and the call button makes an awful screech, but I think that's simply the way it was designed. Looking up the FCC ID, it was made by Loyal Technology Company Limited of Hong Kong. It's a Part 15 low-power transceiver toy walkie-talkie. The output power is not specified, but it has a frequency range of 49.82 to 49.9 megahertz, which overlaps with the frequencies that old-fashioned 49 megahertz cordless telephones used. So sure enough, when I key up this handset, you can hear it goes silent. When I turn it off, you can hear the hiss again. So it is receiving something. And when I set the telephone base to channel 2 and key up this mic on the walkie-talkie, you can hear it coming out of the telephone speaker. So the transmitter part of this is working as well. But we're not going to be able to communicate intelligible speech between the two because the telephone uses frequency modulation, FM, while the walkie-talkie uses amplitude modulation, AM. The better walkie-talkies, designed for grown-ups to use, did use FM, but not a toy like this. But all is not lost because I have this little USB device which can receive just about any frequency as either FM or AM. Not very well, but it should be good enough for a quick test. And this thing has such terrible sensitivity that I think it may be broken, but nonetheless, if I key up the mic of the walkie-talkie, we can see a carrier at around 49.858 megahertz. And if I push the call button, you can see some modulation. So it is working. At least the walkie-talkie is. I'm not so sure about this SDR. I won't be able to test it in this video, but the signal coverage of 49 megahertz walkie-talkies ranges from a couple hundred feet up to maybe half a mile under ideal outdoor conditions. The first low-power, license-free 49 megahertz walkie-talkies appeared in 1976 when the FCC allocated 5 channels for them between 49.83 and 49.89 megahertz. The previous generation 27 megahertz walkie-talkies were discontinued due to interference problems caused by them using the same frequency as CB radio channel 14 and could no longer be sold after March 1978. There's what's inside, and oh boy, if you've taken apart the cheapest of the cheap radios from the 70s or 80s, then you'll recognize this construction style. The brown circuit board with the perforated edges, wax slopped all over the place, components thrown in like darts at haphazard angles, clearly hand-assembled using sweatshop labor. But it does actually contain 6 transistors, one at the upper left, one at the upper right, and 4 at the bottom. So it's telling the truth. And there's the speaker, and it's using these 2 metal springs as antennas. Maybe one for transmit and one for receive. Well, I knew I should have trusted them because as cheap as some of their products were, Radio Shack generally was truthful in their claims. Although this being from the year 2000 was really towards the tail end of that old school Radio Shack era. And indeed, it was the end for 49 MHz walkie-talkies. They made one last appearance in the Q-Cat polluted 2001 Radio Shack catalog before disappearing in favor of the new FRS Family Radio Service walkie-talkies, and eventually by kids simply having their own cell phones. Although the 49 MHz band is now largely deserted, these walkie-talkies are still legal to use today, although I would recommend getting something a bit less janky than one of these toys.